Morning. Our soybeans sure do look good. We're gonna get a pretty nice scouting report though when we're out there in the Hagee. Yep, spraying beans today. I don't think we'll get finished, but I'm hoping it's gonna be a pretty productive day. We shouldn't have much left if nothing goes wrong. I probably gotta cross my fingers on that one because we usually need all the luck we can get. Once the truck warms up and the air builds up a little bit, we're gonna be heading up to Helena to pick up a hot load, 320 acres of our next round of herbicide on soybeans, or on soybeans that we haven't sprayed yet because we got a good chunk of those. While we wait on that, I want to give you a quick update. I last checked in with you all 3 days ago on Saturday when we were finishing up spraying Liberty on our XtendFlex soybeans. We're now moving to Enlist on our Enlist soybeans. I'll talk about that a little bit later. The point being, I did not work on Sunday. There's really no reason to work that hard this time of year, especially when you're not chasing rains or whatever, because it hasn't rained at all yet. We've got favorable ground conditions. There's no reason you shouldn't be getting a lot done in a 5-day work week. Monday I was going to spray, but it ended up being a little bit windy. I looked at the forecast on Sunday, decided that I was actually just gonna help Chris and Jeff finish up that bin site over to the west. Got that done. They're moved about a half mile to the southwest here, though Jeff is probably gonna be running the tanker for me after I pick up this load. You all seeing this? There's a turkey in front of this house. Look at it go. Gobble, gobble. Looks like Helena's already dispatching sprayers east first thing in the morning. We're here, time to load up. I made it seem as if I did anything other than pull the truck into the bay, shut it off, and watch them work. Because that's basically what happens here. Headed back home to fill the sprayer. Since we're switching away from a contact herbicide that needs phenomenal coverage to be successful, back to a systemic herbicide where coverage is important, but not really as do or die as it is with a product like Liberty, we went back to the size 6 T-Jet AIXR air inducted extended range tips. Should give us a good consistent particle size over a flat fan spray pattern. These are what we were running for the Liberty. They're the turbo twin jets, putting out a front and back pattern. At 20 gallons an acre with these, most of the droplets we're putting out are kind of in that medium size range, which is a fairly small droplet. These size 6s, if we run 15 to 16 mile an hour at 15 gallon an acre, are probably going to be coarse to medium. Maybe if we can get the pressure higher, we're running that. Like I said, consistent droplet size. We don't necessarily need phenomenal coverage. I also changed a few nozzle bodies that looked like they were just getting worn out and leaking, although I have not actually run any water through to test it, so I'm going to do that real quick. Looks like we've got the right nozzle down on every nozzle body and they're all in working shape. Sometimes I even impress myself. Not that this is a particularly demanding job to flip those around. Before we head to the field, there's a few things I want to change. First thing I want to do is change the product in my system. I'm just going to go to all products because I've never used Enlist before. Then we're going to go to a rate setup. Like I mentioned, we're not actually going to be spraying 20 gallons an acre like we were with Liberty, back to 15 gallon an acre. So I'm going to change my preset rates. These are just going to be bump rates, so if I see an area that's particularly thick with weeds or the weeds are large, I can bump from 14.8, which is going to be my target, to 17.5 or 20, depending on how I feel and how quickly I want the weeds to die. The silver lining of using Liberty on your XtendFlex beans versus dicamba is that you do not have to clean out your sprayer if you're spraying Liberty and then you go to Enlist to start spraying Enlist on your Enlist soybeans. Both Enlist and XtendFlex soybeans share a mutual tolerance to Liberty or glufosinate and Roundup or glyphosate. We used glufosinate and glyphosate on our XtendFlex beans. We're now moving to our Enlist beans, meaning we don't have to clean the tank out at all. If we did the opposite transition and went from Enlist beans spraying Enlist to XtendFlex beans and spraying Liberty or even dicamba, we would have to thoroughly flush out the tank because the Enlist herbicide, which is essentially just 2,4-D, would cook the XtendFlex beans because they are not tolerant to 2,4-D products. heard from nor seen my tanker driver yet this morning, so I'm going to take a quick opportunity to run to Mom and Dad's house and use the restroom while I still can. Unfortunately, the Hagee has a lot of amenities. A toilet is not one. Although, if you wanted to get creative, you could probably find a good spot to sit on that thing. All right, I made it back to the sprayer in one piece. I completely forgot that Jeff had a loaded bean truck here from the bin site to the west that we cleaned out. He's gonna take that to the elevator first thing. To circumvent my temporary driver shortage, I'm just gonna start spraying here behind the main farm. Wasn't my original plan, but that's probably the easiest solution to bridge the gap time-wise. Basically, we're gonna tender ourselves for the first half hour. He may be back before I even need to come fill again. On the rest of our enlist beans is pretty simple. With a carrier volume of 15 gallons per acre, we are going to be spraying 32 ounces of enlist, 12 ounces of clethodim, which is a grass killer, and then 2 ounces of Zidua SC, which is a group 15 residual herbicide to hold back small seeded broadleafs if we get a rain to activate it. I'll talk about that later. And then some surfactants. That's the mix that's going to take us home on the rest of these enlist acres. Other than adding that 2 ounces of Zidua SC for the first time this season, we used that same mixture of clethodim and enlist last year. Worked really well, so I don't think we'll have any issues. I'll talk more about the agronomics and the chemical nature of this later. Definitely smell the enlist. 2,4-D has a very distinct scent. Not to be mistaken with the rotten soybeans I have caked on the bottom of my boots. That was from yesterday's adventure in a little bit of a sour spot in a soybean bin over west. For those of you who have not smelled rotten soybeans before, may God continue to bless you. All right, let's go spray. After spraying the first few days in soybeans once they were up, I pretty much decided that spraying at an angle is probably the optimal thing to do. I can drive down the 20-inch row soybeans without running them over. When I come back to spray fungicide though, regardless of how good of a job driving I do, the soybeans will be so big that I'll probably end up just pulling 2 rows down. So I'm just going ahead and spraying our herbicide pass at an angle, making sure that I keep the auto steer line. Then when we come back to spray fungicide, I'll just load that into the screen and we'll take off to the races. Everywhere that I'd be driving would have theoretically already been run over once. So as long as I'm running over branches at fungicide time and not stems, I think I feel a little bit better about that. Spraying at an angle is a tad bit rough, though it's not nearly as bad as spraying crossways. I've got those big size 6 tips on, and at 15 gallon acre, I can go pretty much as fast as I want to through the field. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Probably good for productivity and bad for the long-term life of my boom. Would you look at that? It's already time for our first fill up. As they say, time flies when you're having fun, or fun flies when you're having time. Would you just look at these soybeans? These are a Pioneer 35 T15 enlist bean. Obviously they're enlist because we're spraying enlist on them. I'd say in another week these rows will be closing, especially once I kill off all these weeds. Some of these are left over from the fuel cultivator not getting a complete kill, and we don't use a chemical burn down. Water hemp like that right there is just pesky. It probably came up in the last couple of weeks. Those are really what we're targeting, along with some cucumber and a few other things. My tanker driver showed up. He's going to be coming from the south because we fill on the passenger side. We're going to get going again. 167 acres in the bag first thing in the morning. I will say, out of everything on the farm that I ever try to capture with the drone, the sprayer is the hardest thing to capture on its own, especially when you're trying to drive the sprayer at the same time. It moves so quick, and you also have to keep a pretty vigilant eye on your boom and a few other things, so it makes it rather challenging to get great footage. Okay, on to the next one. It is a relatively square 70, so I should be able to make quick work out of it. I couldn't tell you why, this field has always had a giant ragweed problem. Giant ragweed isn't impossible to kill. It's arguably easier to take down than water hemp is if it gets established. At the same time though, it's fairly persistent and it grows quickly. A few patches of water hemp here and there, that's probably to do with this farm being subject to long-term ponding. This year is an exception, obviously, because we haven't got a tremendous amount of rain, but there's been years in the past where we've had heavy crop loss out here from standing water. Anywhere there's an opportunity for weeds to emerge, they typically do so. Water hemp happens to be exceptional at filling in those voids. That's why you get it in your low spots. No worries, a quick dusting of some night-night juice and about every broadleaf out in this field ought to be toast. That Enlist, which is 2,4-D, I've probably said that 3 times now, works pretty good on broadleaves. There's another 70 acres down. These flat, somewhat square fields you can really cover quickly. Let's just hope that we didn't get the neighbor's non-GMO beans or anyone around us corn, because that clethodim will kill every single corn plant it touches. That's exactly what it was made for. I'm making great time so far this morning. This next set of fields is definitely going to slow me down. 1, I'll have to send Jeff to get another big load in the tanker. 2, these are multiple small fields, rolling, terraced, just not as quick to go through. I sprayed around the outside of the field. There's only like 15 acres on this first patch. I'm gonna fill up, should empty Jeff out in the tanker, and then we'll go ahead and send him up for more chemical. I believe that spot right there is where we accidentally overfilled the sprayer with Acuron GT. Probably don't have to worry about anything growing there for a few years. We got 1,000 gallons out of the tanker before it was empty. I'm gonna go ahead and call in the batch. I will probably run out before Jeff's back unless he drives pretty quick. We spotted Chris in the wild, mowing roadsides. Since Jeff is helping me, he's cleaning up some of our grass along the fields. We're a little bit late to the party on that one. Some of those north of town farmers have already mowed the roadsides twice. We haven't even gotten to it the first time yet. This isn't going to sound believable. This is working out exactly as I'd anticipated. Took me a while to spray some of these rolling terrace farms. There's a little back piece there, a lot of folding, unfolding, and just slow traveling in general. I think Jeff may actually be not too far off from being back to the field. I got 35 acres or so left to spray here. Got 75 about half mile to the east. We're gonna keep putting the hammer down though. While we sit under our very expensive umbrella and wait on Jeff in the tanker, let's talk a little bit about chemistry. And no, not chemistry between you and I. Chemistry like the herbicides we're applying to our field. Hold on 1 second, I might as well shut the Hagee off. When you're planting your herbicides for the year, there are 2 things you always got to make sure you can take care of out in your field: broadleaves and grasses. Those 2 categories of plants pretty much encompass 99.9% of what we fight out here in our fields in terms of weeds. Would you look at that? A tire flattener. See, don't say I'm not doing anything productive out here. Historically speaking, or at least since the invention of Roundup Ready soybeans, almost every pass on a genetically modified field of soybeans had Roundup or glyphosate in it. Roundup is a non-selective herbicide, meaning it kills both grasses and broadleaves. However, in the last 5 to 10 years, it's lost a lot of its luster that allowed it to be such a powerful herbicide for such a long time. There's a ton of weeds, specifically broadleaves, that have grown resistant to it, meaning that in a way it's almost become selective to just grasses. Don't get me wrong, it is a phenomenal grass control product and it still picks up a few broadleaves here and there. Overall though, it's just not the silver bullet that it was 2 decades ago. In itself, that could be a 10-hour discussion. We're not going to talk about the herbicide resistance. Just know that Roundup isn't as effective as it used to be about covering all of the broadleaves, specifically the ones we struggle with, though it does pick up grass as well. So regardless of its ability to pick up broadleaves, most farmers did always include Roundup Roundup in a post-herbicide pass on their soybeans because they wanted to pick up grasses. The newest generation of herbicide tolerance traits in soybeans allow soybeans to be resistant to some very powerful herbicides, specifically growth regulators. Now, there are unique tolerances depending on if you have XtendFlex or Enlist beans. I can see my tanker coming from the north, so I'm on the clock. Let me talk specifically about why we are using Enlist and clethodim as opposed to using Enlist and Roundup or glyphosate. Enlist is basically just 2,4-D. Obviously, it's fancy 2,4-D. It's supposed to be better, less volatile, whatever. In all reality, it is literally 2,4-D. You could spray generic 2,4-D on these soybeans, except for the fact that it'd be off-label, thus it's against the law. And you all know that we would never knowingly break the law. You have to use their fancy Enlist 2,4-D because that is the only thing labeled to be applied to Enlist soybeans. If you wanted to go out and spray 2,4-D on these, you could. But just like I said, it's against the law, so don't do that. If I could give you a metaphor, it'd be kind of like buying some special fancy trash can, and they really want you to use their proprietary trash bags in the trash can because it's just the slickest thing since sliced bread. At the end of the day, you could actually just go buy regular hefty trash bags and put them in there, but they don't want you to do that. And obviously there's the legal implications that I've mentioned probably 5 times. You get the point. You could spray generic 2,4-D on these Enlist soybeans if you so choose to do so. Okay, I'm rambling. Let's wrap this up. 2,4-D is a selective herbicide. It has very minimal activity against grasses. It is fairly phenomenal against most broadleafs, although it can miss some occasionally depending on the weather and other factors. In the current mix that I'm spraying on our Enlist beans, that leaves a flaw of no ability to pick up grasses. Here comes in either Roundup or some type of selective grass killer. Because of the high price of Roundup last year, we actually opted out of using Roundup and applied clethodim, which is just a selective grass killer. Will not harm any broadleafs, however, it will kill any grass it touches, including everyone's field corn. There is no genetic modification against clethodim. Really, it'll smoke everything, so you have to be very careful getting close to the neighbor's corn. That's something that I've had to do as I'm spraying. But that was primarily because of an economic driver. Okay, hold that thought for a second. I gotta load up. Whoa! Another fresh batch of chemical on the sprayer. Time to knock out the rest of this field and move down the road. Look at how lush these Don Mario 3756Es are over here. They look phenomenal. Almost looks like we got 100% stand out of what we planted. And yes, I know, I'm spraying crossways again. It is rough, but it was the most optimal choice. It is nearly impossible to film while driving a sprayer, especially going crossways because it's so bumpy. By the time I get the camera up and going, it's time to turn again, and I need both hands. Regardless, like I said, the Don Mario 3756Es here look phenomenal. It's not really surprising based on the historical production of this farm. What's interesting about this is that it's not even close to our best dirt on paper. However, year in and year out, for both corn and soybeans, it always excels, and I don't understand why. It's light dirt, it's got some roll to it. I don't know if it's because we've been wet. If you've got a roll, that means the water gets off and it stays hydrated and the crop never runs out of moisture, but I really don't have a solid answer. The beans look good. Let's just keep it simple like that. While I'm moseying my way down this lane that takes me back to the road, I want to finish what I was saying earlier about using the clethodim with our growth regulator herbicide. Like I said, at this point in the evolution of herbicides and herbicide resistance, Roundup is pretty much only put into a concoction to clean up grasses. It can pick up a stray broadleaf here or there, but your water imps, your giant ragweeds, your mare's tail, it's not going to hurt them. That's why you got to have the firepower of a growth regulator or something like glufosinate added into the herbicide tolerance of the soybean so you could apply it on there. They're not naturally resistant to it. We went with the clethodim because last year when Roundup was on a shortage, like a few other things because of all the COVID issues and shipping, and I honestly don't know the reason, the price of Roundup per acre to spray it was going to be pretty astronomical compared to what it normally costs. It used to be as cheap as it could come, and last year it was pretty expensive, so we considered the alternative of using a clethodim with our broadleaf killing product, whether it be a dicamba, a Liberty, or an Enlist. Essentially, one of those three herbicides are going to carry the weight of your herbicide program. You put something in to help clean up the grasses. The clethodim actually happened to be very cost effective. Because we're using it with a growth regulator, it is actually somewhat antagonistic on grasses. So you do have to use about a third higher rate of the product. It's really no big deal because it's so cheap as it is and works well. On top of that, you also get the benefit of cleaning up volunteer corn or last year's corn that is genetically modified to be Roundup resistant because it's the offspring of GMO Roundup ready corn. Basically, it's a cheap way to get pretty clean fields. I'm headed back east, closer to home base. There's the main farm just a mile to the east down the road. Jeff's sitting here because I'm on a 90-acre field. I'll have to fill up again pretty shortly. These are a Pioneer 31A95. They look pretty lush as well. Even though we haven't had much rain in the last 4 to 5 weeks, I don't really think that our crops are struggling more so than they normally would this time of year with the heat. There's plenty of moisture in the profile. It's just a matter of whether or not it starts raining before maybe July, because that's when the water really counts. One thing about getting my own sprayer that really excited me was the opportunity to do some trial work on our own farm with some Foliar products in season. Starting that off today with this Helena product called Orbix. It is some kind of foliar nutrition deal. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. The only thing I really know about it is that they recommended it, and it is a 1 quart per acre rate. So basically, once I get my tank down to 450, maybe even 500 gallons, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to go ahead and throw this in because I'm spraying at 15 gallon an acre. I'm not going to change my spray target rate. Technically, you should if you want a proper trial. I'm of the opinion, though, that if a couple of % makes something not work, it probably wasn't going to work at all in the first place. Other than like launching a spaceship maybe, because percentages matter a lot more there. It's not going to take very long for me to spray out the excess in the tank on this field. Half-mile throughs, 20 mile an hour. We're covering acres right now. All right, we've got a smidge over 30 acres left. Regardless of whether or not it's going to be the perfect mix ratio, it's Orbix time. Kind of a catchy name if you think about it. We're not really that far off. A little over 500 gallons in the tank. Right there is because I was lifting the containers higher than I normally would so you guys could see what the product looked like. Jury's still out. I'd say it kind of looks like soy sauce. Okay, now we agitate for a little bit, maybe a minute. If you look very closely, you can see the product cycling through the sight glass there. And if you can't, well, just pretend you do. While we do that, I'll go into our setup page here, product name. You can do tank mixes. I find it's easier just to create a new product. I will name this one Enlist Plus. Is there a plus sign? Orbix. If I can spell it, there it is. And now, as we spray, it'll actually show on the map where we sprayed Enlist and Orbix and where I just sprayed Enlist. So this is not really a biological, it is a nutritional based on the label. Got a little bit of nitrogen, phosphate, potash, boron, cobalt, and copper. And there's another line there: iron, manganese, molybdenum, and zinc. Basically, the principle here is to feed your soybeans a little bit to accelerate growth, especially as we start to head into the reproductive stages. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these soybeans out in the field right now aren't already flowering, especially because they're a 3-1 bean, so they're a pretty short season bean for us. I would venture to say that these may be the first beans we harvest, although I could be wrong. Obviously, 95+% of our success out here in the fields comes down to genetics, weather, drainage, fertility, some things in our control, some things that aren't. It's the other 5% that everyone always spends their time trying to sell you with products like this. And that's not to say that there isn't merit with these products. I want to try them out because maybe there's something we could add to our standard management across the board. If we see a positive ROI on this product, it could be a staple of our operation for years to come. But you can't really make that assessment without putting some trials out in a field, blocking a spot off, and seeing if it actually outperforms your standard management, which we will know here in about 5 or 6 months, because it takes a while to see your results from a trial like this. It looks awfully brown going in the tank. It doesn't look any different coming out the boom once you're spraying it. That's it for the Orbix in this field. Before I move to the next field, maybe I'll switch that back so we don't have Orbix everywhere, at least in the mapping. Orbix sounds like the name of like an alien overlord who came to capture Earth. I am Orbix. Take me to your leader. I am Andy. I've already been in the sprayer too long today. On to the next one. I'd say that corn could use a drink. Would you all agree? When it hasn't rained for a while is when you can really tell the difference between the light rolling soil, the timber soils, the less productive ground, versus the dark prairie soils. Moisture holding capacity is bar none an advantage of that dark soil. This is probably one of our lightest farms here, this corn. I don't think we've done anything to justify it looking like that other than it just needing a rain. I fast forwarded a few fields on you. We're gonna do another product trial. This is called ENC Flex. It's another nutritional by Helena. Okay, I've got everything updated in my Green Star screen. It should map accordingly so the combines can tell what was applied well. That way after harvest I can do some analysis and see if there's any yield difference between our standard and this new product. I don't think it's really that much different than the other product. It's just a different mix of nutrients and micronutrients. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, boron, cobalt, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, zinc. Yeah, that literally looks like the same thing in different ratios. Either way, we're gonna try it out. Most people would call it snake oil, and a lot of these products are, but eventually we'll find something that really is the golden ticket to add another bit of top-end yield to our soybeans. Another big field wrapped up, 110 acres. Got the ENC Flex strip in there to see. All things considered, I think I'm partial to Orbix, the destroyer of worlds. You know, maybe some of these companies would sell more products if they picked less serious names. Like if they're a little bit more trolly about it, people might buy it. I just unfolded at what will be my last field of the day. It's been a pretty good afternoon and evening of spraying. We've had 12 plus hours in the seat. We've got a lot of ground covered. Even if I wanted to keep spraying myself, Helena's closed, so we can't pick up any more hot loads of chemical, and the sun has set and it's gonna be dark within the next 30 to 45 minutes. Typically, you don't actually want to spray herbicides once the sun sets because you want the plants to be actively growing, taking up those herbicides. So I'm gonna finish this field. We'll look at our numbers, see how much we accomplished today. Let's run our report for the day, see how many acres we got in. I picked up 960 acres worth at Helena, but I know I've got probably at least one more full tank on the tanker I didn't get done. That's for that field. Just did. Okay. As you can see right here, January 6th, we sprayed 802 acres of Enlist, and then the two trials I do are actually separate because this is just tabulating the product I applied. So 802 plus 33 plus 34. So we sprayed 860 acres today. Hard to complain about that. Not bad for a rookie. The fun place to look at this is on the John Deere Operations Center map that shows all my movement for the day. Here's where I started at the main farm. Sprayed over here later. We drove over here. Sprayed that field, drove over. Sprayed these three fields. I mean, we were all over the place. Sprayed these two fields. Came up. Sprayed this big field here. Came back down, sprayed this, cut across here, sprayed these three fields, but we just technically call it one field, then finished up here. That's our 860 acres. Pretty good day. And man, I love looking at the operations center. I feel like it's pretty entertaining to see all the colors and what have yous. I don't think it's going to be hard to guess that that's going to be it for me. Myself and the sprayer need a little rest, although we still have beans to spray tomorrow. They threw in like a tiny chance of rain tonight, which is actually why I ran so hard, because I figured if we got a rain, that residual Zidua SC product I had in there would get activated with the rainfall, incorporating it into the top ½ to inch of soil, holding back any weeds that might germinate after a rainfall. Doesn't look like we're going to get it. That's typically what happens when you start to go into a drought. They keep saying, oh, you're going to get a rain here and a rain there, and then you just never get a rain. Although we're way too early in the season to be complaining about a lack of rain. We'll complain a little bit more once July comes around. Alrighty, that's going to be it for me today. I greatly appreciate every single one of you continuing to tune in and support the channel. Your viewership means the world to me. I'll catch you all in the next episode. Until then, make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great day, everyone. Peace!